Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Among the Clouds. Today we're talking to Jeff Kandefer from the bands The Daysleepers, as well as his newest project, Pliocene. Mostly known for the albums Drowned in a Sea of Sound and Creation, Jeff is now finishing up his first full length with Pliocene. We talk about what got him into shoegaze, as well as how he started The Daysleepers, how he writes songs, and how he records his songs. If this sounds like something you're into, please like and subscribe below, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks. Hey, Jeff, how's it going?
Hey Neil, what's happening, man?
Hey, all right, so you're doing the first show here. You're the first guest, and you were kind enough to kind of offer to help me through this thing and help me through it. But we've known each other. I think I contacted you in the summer of 2019, so we're probably going on 2 years here.
Yeah, sounds
And
about right.
I had contacted you out of the blue. Didn't even know if you knew anything about who I was or my band whatsoever.
And I did.
and just asked your advice on some stuff, and we talked on the phone. And I've pretty much just been bugging you through text messages ever since. We talk about gear and music and whatnot, but as far as personal things and your history or anything, I know pretty much nothing about it, other than some interview stuff that you've done or whatever.
Right.
And your social security, I know that. So
Good, excellent. It's already been taken once.
I do my homework on these things, man.
Yeah. No, it's been really cool though. I mean, I know, just like for me, because you've been producing a lot longer than I have, and I'm still, figuring that out. And so you've, been able to help me out with some questions that I've had too. So it's just kind of cool to be able to bounce some, technical stuff off each other and, kind of figure out our way through this production thing.
And you get to show off with all your new gear and make me jealous.
Yeah, well, it's constantly changing. So,
well, yes, mine is too, but yours is at a different level than mine. Mine's like a $60 pedal. Yours is not.
Well, I don't have a crazy amount of stuff, but what I do have, I try to keep it, where I'm pretty happy with it all around. So different, different approaches, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not jealous. Anyway, all right, so let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
Tell me about your introduction to shoegaze, dream pop. I'm just gonna say shoegaze.
Mhm.
For the record, it was all just shoegaze to me in the early '90s. I never even
Yeah.
heard dream pop until like 2000. Okay,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
for here on out, it's just shoegaze, and we're just gonna leave it at that. So
Good.
lay it on me.
Yeah. So I'm kind of, I would say I was kind of late to the game on a lot of the shoegaze stuff in the '90s. I'd obviously heard of, a lot of the bands associated with the genre, but my focus at that time, I was uh, teens to early 20s, so a lot of what I liked back then was a lot of the grunge music that was out. So I wasn't super focused on any kind of shoegaze in particular, but I used to watch that show all the time on MTV. I don't know if you remember 120 Minutes.
My dad taped it every single Sunday, and I
Yeah.
watched it for probably 10 years, honestly. So yeah.
Yeah, and that you remember that show just had like everything in it. So you get all different kinds of alternative music. So when I would watch that, I would see, Catherine Wheel, Ride, Lush. I remembered
Sure.
seeing those bands on there, but I never really associated them with a scene. And at that time, I was listening to more like, Alice in Chains, um, whatever else was going on, Soundgarden, a lot of those grunge bands. But
Sure.
I would kind of just take in whatever was around, and
Right.
just kind of liked a lot of stuff. So when I actually got into the actual genre itself, or when it was sort of more introduced to me, was like more in the like early 2000s. So I was kind of catching on to that second wave of shoegaze as it was coming around, you know. but the way that I came about kind of zeroing in on is my friend Sam in Rochester. We always kind of like similar music, and he gave me a couple albums. I know he gave me Just for a Day by Slow Dive, and I put that in. And I'd already been listening to bands, like The Cure, so I knew what like ethereal guitar work was like. Cocktail
Hmm.
Twins, I was into some of that stuff. So when I heard that album, it was just, to me, it sounded like, just a more washed out, kind of bigger sounding like version of The Cure or something like that.
Right. It was like the next level after Disintegration.
Yeah, where you really start cranking that reverb even more, and the delays lines just go on, and all that stuff just kind of crosses together and gets all muddy and crazy.
Right.
Um, and that, to me, so it was kind of like a natural progression into it. So, anyways, I got that album and I listened to it and I liked it. I wasn't like, 100% blown away by it, but I would listen to it pretty regularly. And it wasn't until I went into the local record store, I was just looking for something to buy. And I was like, well, I like that one Slow Dive record. So I picked up Souvlaki and I put that in. And I remember when I was kind of clicking through the tracks, just kind of getting an overall view of the album. When I hit Souvlaki Space Station,
I knew you were going to
that
say
song, yeah,
that.
I mean, that was the one, like the hair on my neck stood up.
Sure.
And I was like, what is this? To me, it didn't, now I'm more familiar with that sound, but at the time it was like, it just sounded like music that like aliens made or something. It didn't sound like something that would come from Earth
Right.
almost. So it was a very memorable moment, in my progression into it. And so from there, it's just like down the rabbit hole thing. One thing led to another. Then I started listening more to My Bloody Valentine. Of course, I'd heard of, you know, before, but never really gave too much attention, and just kind of started taking everything that I could find of the genre. So
Right.
spiraled from there.
All right. So let's talk about. I'm assuming you were a musician already before discovering it.
Yeah.
So tell me about, when did that happen? How did that happen? What made you want to become a musician?
Weird stuff at the time. I was so young. When I wanted to start playing guitar, I probably was around 13 or 14 when I started, bugging my parents for a guitar or whatever. And yeah, I would say I was about, I think it was late 14 or 15 when I got my first guitar. It was a really, really bad Strat copy. Hondo, I think, was the brand.
I always hear about people with these Hondos. I swear to God, I've never seen one, or if I have, I don't know. It's like, I thought there was something that like died in the late 70s or something. But
Yeah,
okay.
it very well could have. I mean, we bought it off of a friend of mine, and it was like, I didn't like it at all. I didn't think it particularly sounded good, but I had no point of reference at the time. So I was like, cool, I got a guitar.
Sure.
And I just started messing around, and really the whole thing for me was just to, I listened to like Green Day at the time, and stuff like that, and I just wanted to play those songs.
Right. Well, I
Uh,
mean, and they're power chords. So, I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
easy place to start, right?
sure. You're a musician, you hear shoegaze, dream pop. At one point, are you saying, okay, I'm going to transfer over and start trying to write this?
I very much learned how to play guitar a lot by watching Robert Smith play guitar, and you can kind of hear it in my note selection even, and some of the scales that I play and stuff, because, and so like, I think just from there, I just, started cranking the reverb up, adding some delay in. I'd add a second delay because I'd heard that kind of gets the sound where you can kind of get that
Sure.
ping ponging effect. So I started messing around with just, stuff the information that I could gather that was available at the time. And ultimately, I think I just sort of arrived at a sound that I thought was good enough. Now when I listen to it, it's like, wow, I wasn't really paying attention to like EQing the guitar a whole lot. A lot of it sounds muddy to me.
Sure.
But, you got to start somewhere and you got to grow from it. Another thing too, though, is when we started the Daysleepers, I was giving them music and they were listening to it and they were liking it. So I was like, and I knew they were great musicians, Scott, our bass player, and Mario, our drummer. I just knew if they could pick it up, if they really liked it enough. And it seemed like they did. So our first practice, I said, why don't you just put on that Slow Dive record and learn Souvlaki Space Station, and that'll be our first jam. And if we can get the sounds, if we can kind of make it sound, like that, then we can kind of maybe take the principles of that and sort of transition that into our own style. Then we can mix in some of the music that came from our other, backgrounds in music, and it would make something unique. And that's really, it's funny, it started that way. We just started with a cover, and when we played it, we were all kind of looking at each other like we all learned the parts. We were like, wow, that sounded better than I thought, we way closer than I thought we'd ever get.
Right. And I'm sure it was totally, you were on a high, but just the fact
Yeah.
that you started off with that. Yeah.
Right.
I get
Yeah.
it.
And it kind of set the mood. And I think in that same practice, we wrote one of the first songs for our first EP, the opening track on it, Threnody. So it was like kind of a pretty natural, quick transition right into the songwriting process.
So 2004, you start the Daysleepers. Now, was there a specific band or situation or that happened that made you say, okay, I want to start this band? Were you in previous bands before that? Was this your first band? How did that happen? And as far as the members go, how did they come about, to join what is the Daysleepers?
But with Daysleepers, that was different because, we kind of talked about it a little bit. But when I heard Slow Dive, that was kind of like, I think I can make stuff like this. I obviously couldn't do it like them, and I didn't want to because they already existed. But I'll tell you, one of the motivating factors I had is that at that time, I loved that music and I was discovering so much of it. But it was like Slow Dive had, what was it, 2 albums and or 3 albums and a couple of EPs. And
Right.
to me, that it wasn't enough material, and a lot of these bands, by the time I discovered them, were no longer in existence. Neil and Rachel were doing Mojave 3, which I liked, but I wasn't crazy about, wasn't as crazy about that as I was Slow Dive. And one of the tipping points was that basically I just wanted more of this music and I couldn't find it. So
Right.
I was like, well, I think maybe I can just make it, and I'll make music at least that I like. It won't be great,
Right.
but maybe at least I'll want to listen to it, and I'll just kind of make my own. I couldn't really find other bands doing it. Eventually I found like Ariel, and I found Christian's band Monster Movie, which I liked a lot, and the Claire Records stuff, which
Right.
I was a big fan of, High Spire. And I was like, okay, well, this stuff's pretty cool. At that point, we had already been a EP or two in, maybe, when I started really kind of discovering the new scene of it. But that was kind of the motivating force. I couldn't find new bands doing it, at least with my limited knowledge of how to find them. So it was like, okay, I'm just going to make it then. We'll have fun with it, whatever. And the guys, I'd mentioned it before, but we were already friends. I knew them from other bands. And we just decided, let's just give this a shot. We don't know if it'll work, but if we like what we hear, let's continue it. If we don't, we'll just, we'll just have fun with it. And from there, everybody loved what we were doing, and we just kept rolling with it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we were playing Chicago like every 2 to 4 weeks for years, until the point where there was no shoegaze scene, So when you started Daysleepers, we were ending Whimsical,
right?
Because we'd been doing it for 5 years and it had just stagnated and wasn't getting any bigger. We just got so burnt out on it,
Sure.
to the point where literally our second album was 90% done and we called it quits. And so we ended up finishing that album like 11 years later because I found the missing hard drive.
And that was kind of like the gap in between, our album, Drowned in a Sea of Sound and Creation. I had that idea for Creation like a year or two after, we released Drowned in a Sea of Sound, but things happened where we just couldn't get together as regularly, kind of similar to what you were saying. It just we weren't able to really record at that time, but I still had that idea. And even though it ended up in such a different place, it was something, it was like, I want to come back to that. I want to finish that off one of these days. And it took like 10 years, but
it's weird though, but it's a great feeling when it's done, especially because for us, our first album is such garbage that the second album was going to be such a next step, if you will, because I had recorded it myself and I went to sound engineering school and I was working in recording studios. I didn't record the first album, and the mix and everything was just so not what I wanted. You know what I mean?
Right,
And,
right. Yep.
And even if when you started producing on your own or even when I started producing on my own, it's even if it wasn't 100% technically better than what a professional studios, it's still what you heard. It's
Yeah,
still what you
exactly.
wanted. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
maybe it's not the greatest guitar sound ever, but it's
Yeah.
unique in the fact that it's what you wanted.
Yeah, you would at least nail like the atmospherics of it. Like, okay, that's how big I want that guitar to sound,
Right.
or that's how I want those two guitars layered.
As somebody who released a couple albums, EPs, whatever in the genre, are you somebody who is always trying to evolve your sound, change it slightly without going too far? Were you always trying to perfect the original sound?
Yeah, I think that's always the goal, right? Like you want to progress to the next version of your sound, and but the trick is always retaining the balance, right? Where you keep enough of your DNA
Right.
that you was your original intention, but you just sort of add elements or something to it to keep it interesting. I always thought some bands just nailed that. Like at first, the focus was just on kind of getting the overall sound and just kind of writing good songs that were, you know, ethereal. But then we started to notice that, like Soft Attack, our second EP, I was like, I like what we did the first time, but I want it maybe this a little bit more, distortion and aggression. And so that's why you have the first track, the title track is, it's got almost like a punk beat to it. And it's a real short song opener. And I just kind of wanted to hit a little bit heavier on that one. And then with Drowned in a Sea of Sound, I wanted that album, my overall picture for that was that it would just not be, I really wanted the songs to all be pretty different from each other, whether it was in the mood of the song. So you'd have some that were more upbeat, some that were a little bit darker, some that had more of a post-punk, backing to them, some that were more, Cocktail Twins light and sparkly. And I wanted all of those things on there so that each song was like its own individual. I think we really nailed that on Creation, I think, is where we really kind of solidified that. And it was nice when a friend of mine that's in another band, he said those exact words. This album really takes you on a journey. And I think for me, that was the greatest thing because I just want the album to not be dull and just kind of take you through a series of emotions. And I think that's where we did that best on that album. So that's always been kind of the progression to make the songs and the albums just feel fresh, change enough, but maybe do some things a little bit different from the last release. Maybe the guitars and the vocals are more of the focus on this one, whereas before the rhythm section came through a little bit more. I like to change that kind of stuff up so that every album doesn't just sound like a repeat. And that's I think how you keep things fresh.
So for me, pretty much 90% of everything I write is on this acoustic guitar. Okay. And it's a song first. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I record it, I start adding effects to it. And that's why our stuff really isn't super effects heavy because it was written on acoustic. Okay. And you can only start adding so much stuff to it before it starts sounding weird because it really wasn't written to have
Mm-hmm.
so much effects. And then there's like another 10% that I write where I kind of like when I got the loomer pedal. Okay. I find some setting on there, and all of a sudden, the first thing I play turns out to be the intro to our song, The Exception. I'm not expecting you to know that song, but it's, I mean, it literally was the first thing I played, and I went, okay, I got to record that right now. But it was based on the effects, and it might not even be a great riff if I took the
Mm.
effects off of it. Do you know what I'm
Sure.
saying?
Absolutely.
So to me, there's two schools of thought. There's I write a song, add some stuff to it after the fact, or the song is written around something effects based that you wouldn't have gotten. I could never have gotten it just on an acoustic. I think there's pros and cons to both. What's your approach to songwriting?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever written a song on an acoustic guitar. I always at least start on an electric. And I think, like you said, I probably have written in both of those ways. Like I might write with effects on. I might write with the guitar more dry, maybe just to get the chord progressions. At least early on, I did that. I'd come up with some good chord progressions, then I'd start layering in the effects while writing. But I think now, more often than not, I usually write almost as the effects are just their own instruments. So like I'm almost sort of recording and mixing at the same time. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Sure.
applying the effects, I'm writing, because I'm sort of getting more closer to what I want in the end result. So um, it might be now, especially with this project where I'm working totally by myself. I'll probably lay some kind of a beat down bass line or something like that. Then I'll start working on leads, and the lead part is really where it's going to start forming the song. But I do think that definitely inspires ideas. Like I've gotten a new pedal, and I've written 2 or 3 new songs right away with that.
Right. Right.
I think there's songs in that stuff. I mean, I view them like their own instruments. They inspire new ideas,
Right.
and
And I tell
definitely
my
as a
wife this all the time. I need a new pedal because
here you go. I can back you up on that one.
Jeff says.
Yeah.
So as far as songwriting goes, on our first 2 albums, I would write the entire song on acoustic, like, start to finish. This is intro, verse, chorus, middle, verse, chorus, ending, whatever. This show it to the guys. We kind of figure it out or whatever. But the song was written.
Hmm.
Now, I come up with a verse and a chorus on acoustic, and I'm in Pro Tools. I'm programming drums. I start recording the verses and the choruses. And I have my setup is so I could start a song and come back 6 months later and dial in the exact same song. I know what guitar I used, you know what I mean? Like I take pictures of pedal
Hmm.
settings and what equipment
Yeah.
I use, and I do that. I'll come 6 months later or a year later, and I could dial in that same sound and finish, and you'll never know that I changed anything. But for me, I almost use Pro Tools as an instrument.
Yeah.
It wasn't back in the day. It was okay. You record the drums for the whole song. The song's already
Mhm.
written. Whereas now I'm almost like an electronic producer where I'm using Pro Tools. I'm cutting and pasting and I'm moving everything around. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
when you hear a verse, it's been cut and pasted every time you hear the verse. I'm not
Yeah.
playing that every
No,
time.
no, no.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And now I'm probably taking all the emotion out of the playing, but just knowing that I can, my OCD tendencies, I can't just let it be. I have to have
Yeah.
everything synced up perfectly. And
Yeah.
so I start a song and I move it all around until it works. You know what I mean? Yeah, I could never
Yeah.
do that 20 whatever years ago. When I track guitars, I'll record my fuzz or my distortion overdrive in there and any kind of unique sounding effect, if it's like a whammy bend thing from the loomer or it's a slow dive type sound or whatever may be.
Yeah.
But for any like modulation and delays and things like that, for me, unless it's some weird sound that was unique that I wrote with that sound, it's all
Hmm.
added in as a plugin later. Because for
Yeah.
me, I like to mix and be able to take stuff apart and
Sure.
decrease stuff or increase it. What is your
Yep.
process like?
Yeah, very similar actually. I'm a lot like you, and maybe that's our background listening to Boards of Canada or Tycho or some of these bands. I definitely produce exactly like you said, like an electronic producer. I'm always interested in the best take of something that is sort of hitting the emotion that I want to get, and it's for me, it's very unlikely that I'll do that perfectly twice. So, I do a lot of editing like that where I'll take the takes that I like and I'll loop in effect. But yeah, that's definitely, I think, my approach. Because I do have some pedals here that I'll just, I'll record the reverb on the guitar. But more and more these days, I try not to do that. I try to leave everything kind of editable in the box, so I can pull back a little bit here and there, especially for mixing and, EQing and stuff like that. It's good to have those keep it a little bit more editable. Gives you a lot more flexibility later on. So yeah, it's a similar approach to what you were saying.
So in 2021, there's definitely gear coming out now that's kind of tailored towards shoegaze and dream pop. The manufacturers, the companies, they know of the genre now, and they're making stuff for us to use. Is that something you look for? Do you pay attention to any of it? Um, what do you use? Are you using older gear? Are you just using what's new and best for you?
Yeah, uh, gear is a weird thing for me. I just have certain requirements of things that I'm looking for in specific things. So I usually kind of go based on that. For example, I really like Strymon stuff is what I use a lot of right now, but not really just because of the brand name. I just think the quality of their stuff, to me, it sounds like rack gear, kind of like in pedal form, which is nice. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds. But then there's also specific things that I really like about them, like my delay that I'm using here, the Volante. It has like, you can pan the heads of the delay in different directions to kind of get like a really nice wide full sound. So for that, that's like a huge selling point for what I like to do. I can kind of pan those heads independently, which not a lot of pedals let you do. So certain things, like I'm usually just kind of looking for features that will allow me to do kind of achieve the sounds that I hear in my head. If something's labeled a specific way, it's probably not going to appeal to me unless it has something that I'm already looking for. So
If I have a specific
I'm really
sound
kind of basing it more on features. If it has what I'm looking for, I'll get it. And as you know, I get equipment in and out of here all the time. If I have a specific sound that I want, I'll get something in here. I'll use it. I'll record with it. But if I'm not using it for anything else after that, I'll send it out. I don't like to have stuff sitting around that I'm not using at the time.
But you have to admit, like Strymon, when they made the Big Sky,
Yeah,
they're aware of what shoegaze is. You know what I mean?
sure.
So there's
Yeah,
also a part of that where it's not just Boss making a delay. Like this was
right.
made for. It wasn't made for
Oh yeah,
classic rock guy. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
and I think that is the thing. That's why I have a blue sky, or I mean a big sky, and I had I don't have it anymore, but I had a night sky too. I mean, obviously, yeah, those aren't you're not buying those for the plate reverb in there. You're buying those because they go up to 11 when it comes to the
Right.
decay of the reverb, and
Sure.
really cranking some big modulated reverbs out of those things. So yeah, of course. And but then again, that ties into it. Those were offering features that not a lot of other boxes were doing at the time when I bought them. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of reverb pedals, but some of them just sound like realistic room reverbs. And I can do that with plugins or anything like that. But if I
Right.
want these humongous spaces, um, some of these pedals just do that stuff better than others.
So from 2005 to roughly 2015, Whimsical was done. Um, I was totally burnt out, like I mentioned earlier in 2005. I had did a bunch of albums with other bands and other genres. I was still listening to shoegaze, that whole time. It was still something I was completely keeping up with. Um, but I was just burnt out, and creatively, I just had to go do other things. Is that something you've dealt with? Because I know there was time between creation and
Hmm.
drowning in the sea of sound. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that was interesting because that time period in between those two albums was a lot of just changes in my life. I mean, the year that Drowned in a Sea of Sound came out, I got married. I think I really did probably want to break, just from to think of something totally different for a while. I guess I kind of need to do that from time to time. I can't stay on stuff too long, or I'll lose interest in it. So, or I have to keep moving on it and start changing it, or else if I feel like anything is getting kind of static, I'll definitely lose interest on it. So, yeah, I think there was definitely a time in there where I kind of lost a lot of interest in making music because I was thinking of other things.
did you stop playing in that time, or did you sell all your gear? Did you still have some gear? Did you have to rebuy a bunch of stuff to start
Yeah,
ramping up again?
interesting question. Yeah, I think I went about 2 years where I just pretty much, I think I probably left my Jazz Master in its case for like 2 whole years. We were in an apartment too, and that was another reason I couldn't play loudly. So I just kind of lost a lot of interest in it at the time, and a lot of that stuff just sat in its case. I still had at the time I had like a Marshall cabinet and a Fender had, and it was just sitting in storage. That's when a lot of this, some of these new bands were coming out, or not new bands, but new material was coming out that was really inspiring. And I did think like, yeah, I sold off a lot of equipment. I didn't have that much stuff. If I started music up again, I'd want to get all new stuff, or
Right.
pretty much like a lot of new
It's
stuff,
like
just
a
to
new
reinvigorate.
slate. It's a new start.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much new
Yeah.
stuff had come out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like 10 years worth of time had passed, or 8 years or whatever. And I'm like, wow, the pedals are crazy now. Look what they're doing. And that was another
Right.
thing that really kind of inspired me too.
So when you're writing your songs, do you have like a song structure that you kind of go with, like a pop song structure where you have verses, chorus, a bridge, a middle, then go back into like a double chorus and the song? Or is it kind of a free for all where you kind of start a song and you let the song dictate where it's going?
I think it's kind of changed over time, like I think when the band started, it was more like, because I was most familiar with that sort of genre, I would just write all the parts. I'd write the vocals and the guitar parts, and then the guys would just come in and we kind of build from there together. But basically, yeah, the song structure was in place already, and then we just kind of fine tune it as to how it's going to end up. A lot of times it was verse, chorus, if that's what it felt like the song needed. My goal was always like with the vocals and the guitars, like I just wanted that stuff to be like stuck in people's heads, like, so I always tried to write super catchy melodies with the vocals that would just be like like an earworm sort of thing. And I knew it would work. Like when I'd hear, we'd finish practice or whatever, and members of the band would be singing certain parts of the songs. I knew that it kind of was successful then, because it would just get stuck like that. So there's the dream pop part of it. I would kind of, underneath a lot of those effects and things like that, there is really just a pop song. I wanted it to be,
Right.
like super catchy. I guess that's what I always liked about like the Sundays and stuff like that. But yeah, like later on when I was writing Creation, that was a little bit different, because now it wasn't as collaborative in a writing room together.
Mhm.
It was more me starting these songs and pushing them along, pretty much recording the full songs, but then knocking out the scratch drums and the bass, and then handing them over to the guys to, work out those parts. So that was a different structure, and it ended up with a different result, but still sounds like the Daysleepers. So I think that was kind of neat how that worked out.
Yeah, I definitely think Creation has a different sound than the previous stuff. I mean, you can
Yeah,
definitely tell there was a break in time there.
sure.
And but I think you guys benefited from that.
Yeah,
Um, if you would have tried to make Creation 80 years earlier, it would have totally been a completely different album.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think you
And I
can hear
think,
that. And
yeah, I think sonically it's where I always wanted our stuff to be. I mean, it hits that like level of ethereal, um, sort of sonic textures and like soundscaping that I kind of always wanted, but maybe didn't give as much attention to on the earlier stuff.
so it's been a couple years since Creation came out. I know you're working on the Pliocene album. You've released, I believe, 8 singles, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, do you still feel associated with shoegaze and dream pop, or do you feel like you've just outgrown it, burnt out on it? Like, what was the motivation for sort of slightly changing the style? But we've already talked that it's still in that world.
Yeah, exactly. It's a a different way of kind of producing ethereal sounds, and uh, but yeah, it's all kind of sound design and kind of like these textured soundscapes. But yeah, my new project, Pliocene, is it's really kind of the way that I view it is it's kind of going back to the stuff that I was really getting into or was into before I started the Day Sleepers. So like the DNA of shoegaze is in all that stuff. The just in the simple fact that they share a lot of similar effects. Lots of delays and reverbs and things like that. But textures in this stuff maybe in a little bit different way. And of course, now I'm using more synths. Uh, and the guitars even are played, I think, a lot differently. The guitar lines are just kind of written differently, especially in the new stuff that's not even released right now. It's the guitars. You may have a hard time deciphering what's a guitar and what is a synth. But to me, that doesn't really matter, because I'm just trying to layer textures in a way that just sounds pleasing. I think for me, it's not so much that I definitely don't feel like I've outgrown shoegaze or anything like that, because I think that I'm not good enough to do that at that. It's just that for me, tend to shift on things every 10, 15 years. I kind of want to keep moving or sort of evolving to something that keeps things interesting for me. And mostly for, shoegaze, I felt like I did what I wanted to do within that genre. Sure, I could
Hmm.
put another album together probably, but to do that, I'd want the other guys involved in it. And at this time, that's just not something that can really happen just with, circumstances. And for this point in my life, I don't know if it's the age I'm at or what, but this kind of more like chill wave, kind of relaxing, sort of textured, soundscapey stuff. That's just what I want to hear. That's what I'm
Hmm.
listening to now. I definitely feel a shift in the type of music that I'm going to. I'm working on a full length album right now. I do have the 8 singles out. Those will get remastered at some point with a couple extra tracks, and we'll release that. But right now, I'm making really good progress on 10 new songs, and this album is something It's definitely a new place for me, and it's very exciting. I mean, I'm listening to these tracks and where they are right now, and I've got 9 of the 10 written and moving pretty far along, and it's just very, very exciting to me. And that's always a good sign. That's how I felt when we did the first and few Day Sleepers releases that we did. Just
Hmm.
super excited about it, couldn't wait to put it out, and I feel that again with this project. So that's great. Whether it's successful or not, I don't know if people will like it or not, but I know it's where I want to be. And
Right.
I have the luxury of not, I don't do this for a living, so I can afford to be experimental and just do stuff that I like and that makes me happy. And that seems to always translate to finding an audience somewhere.
Right. I mean, if we wanted to make money, we would have picked different genres for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
When do you think it's going to be? I know we're thinking maybe early next year. Um, Obviously, you don't want to rush it. You want it to be right.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of my deadline now. I'm hoping to get the songs actually finished by, as we start to push into fall. And maybe at that point I'll start, I'll do a single here or two just to kind of start building up for the album. But yeah, I'm hoping for early next year, because once you finish the tracks, of course, there's now how do I market this thing? Uh,
Mhm.
then there's a lot of design work involved that I want to get involved in. I want to make videos for almost all the songs, at least some kind of graphical videos, and make sure all of the visual aspect of it is done too. So as a one man,
Right.
project right now, it's a lot of work. So when the songs are done, the work isn't done. It
Right.
just
Right.
almost sort of gets busier after that.
Are you going to self-release again? Are you going to try labels? Like, because I could see like we're mutual fans of Jonas Monk and Manuel, and he's got his label,
Mhm.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are you feeling
I,
about
I
that?
I've had such great success being an independent artist. At least in my eyes, what I would determine success. Now, obviously, I've never tried to be like some, you know, uh, huge influential band or anything like that. I'm just trying to make stuff, but I've actually been able to, kind of keep these projects moving because of my own marketing and my own design background, and I can at least achieve a level that I'm pretty happy with. I'm always open to talking to labels, because if they can offer me a deal that seems reasonable or fair to me, then I'll definitely do that. But I've got pretty strong views on that, because I'm not a touring artist. I'm a producer, really, more than
Right.
anything. Or I'm trying to be. I'm more of a now. I feel like more of a composer artist than anything. I just
Right.
like being in the
Right.
studio, kind of chemistry set. Just mixing stuff together
Sure.
and making cool stuff. I've always seen myself as a producer studio artist, really. That's where I have the most fun. That's where I feel most creative. Um,
So, if you had to show somebody the shoegaze dream pop genre, what would be not your favorite song, but a song that represents what you're trying to get across of what shoegaze is, and also what's your favorite song that you've done with the Day Sleepers, and why?
I mean, I think my obvious go-to would be, I'm going to talk about this song probably too much, but yeah, Souvlaki Space Station has it all for me,
Hmm.
because it just has the atmospherics of that song is just everything I'm always trying to, um, at least emotion wise, trying to reach, just these kind of guitars that are just kind of soaring into space, and just they almost do the communicating, because on that track you can't decipher what the vocals are. I mean, that's common in shoegaze,
Right.
but that's the great thing I think about it. As far as Day Sleeper song, I would say, something off Creation. The song Creation to me has almost everything that I love about the band in it. It's got the super strong rhythm section, but it's got that weird break at the end that I really like. It's got, some of the sparkling, like Cure like guitar lines. It kind of encompasses, almost everything that we try to strive to do. And yeah, I would say, something like that. Flood in Heaven is the big one. That's
I was
our
gonna
biggest
say,
song.
I was going to start
Yeah.
off with what's your favorite Day Sleeper song and why is it Flood in Heaven? But I would have been totally wrong.
No, I mean, I could make a case for any one of those songs. That's another one where it's great because you can't, I mean, the guitars are just so affected in that song. It could be almost anything. It could be a synth pad. It could be, whatever. And I do like that about it's very, the instruments just all sort of blend together, which sometimes you
Mhm.
don't want that, but sometimes I really like that just blanket of heavy sound. It's kind of like warm, and it kind of just, you know,
Sure.
it wraps you in it. And that song does that really well. So I think, yeah, that's definitely up there too. And it's got us the most streams. So that helps.
Yeah, you're not a jerk. Anyway, yeah, I mean, Flood in Heaven's probably my favorite. I was going through it, and because Creation's my favorite release of yours, and I was going through it, and I can't remember the name of the song. I think it's the one with the female vocals on it. And I was
Memory
gonna
maker.
pick
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I was gonna pick that, and then I get the Flood in Heaven. I went, well, I have to pick this. You know,
Yeah.
it's definitely. I mean, I love the whole album, to be honest with you,
Mhm.
but definitely when it gets the Flood in Heaven, there's a. It's just if the rest of the album is a 10 for me, it goes to 11 on that.
Mhm.
As far as it definitely is a crest right there.
Appreciate that.
Um, well, I'm very generous, so.
I know that
um,
about you.
yeah, yeah. All right, Jeff.
Mhm.
Well, thanks. Thanks for agreeing to do this with me, for me, and helping me out in my first episode. I know it's been long, um, but where can people find your music, whether it's Day Sleepers or Pliocene?
Thanks for the opportunity, man. I really appreciate it. And it's been nice chatting, sort of face to face, I guess, if you want to, more than text, I guess. Yeah, as far as the projects go, I always think, Bandcamp's a good place to support independent artists, obviously. Both Day Sleepers and Pliocene is there. As far as social media goes, I don't get crazy involved with it, but Instagram's probably where I'm most active for both projects. So you'll find Day Sleepers and Pliocene there. But really, where you're going to hear or see me releasing more stuff now is going to be through my Pliocene project. So yeah, you can follow me there. I am on Twitter too, but just because of the nature of Instagram, I just like that it's more sort of image based and pictorial. So I kind of stick with that as a visual designer. So yeah, I mean that's probably the best place to communicate or check out what new stuff is going on as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, all of the music's on streaming services, so you can find us there too.
Well, thanks, Jeff, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, take care, Neil. Thanks.
Click. Well, that was the first episode, and I'd like to thank Jeff for taking the time to speak with me. If you'd like to check out any of his music with the Day Sleepers or Pliocene, I've posted links down below. Until the next episode, thanks for watching.